Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I'm Vince Mickens with the Private Air Media Group. With each show, my primary objective is not only to inspire the next generation to pursue opportunities and consider possibilities in aviation and aerospace, but to gain insight on various aspects of our expansive industry that you may have given some thought to or, in fact, may not have ever considered. Here's another show that epitomizes that. By the way, the buzz for this show has been particularly upbeat with a lot of interest. I was sharing that with the guests pre-show. But let's get right into it as I introduce our incredible panel of guests, starting with my friend and business aviation colleague, Michelle Wade. Michelle is an aviation attorney who, after years of practicing aviation law with a previous law partnership, decided to, as they say, hang out her own shingle and start her own firm. Jetstream Law, as it's called, she has been around for about 5 years. And since then, she has had the best kind of challenge, and that's keeping up with her success with influx of new clients. Michelle, it's always great to see you. Welcome to All Things Aviation, or welcome back to All Things Aviation and Aerospace. If it has to do with aviation lending and managing your aviation financial portfolio, I know that sounds like a lot of stuff, and it is. You definitely want Shelley. I'm going to kill your last name, Shelley Svoren. Did I say that right?
Close. That's great, Vince. Thank you.
I'm going to call you Shelley the rest of the show. Who is the founder and CEO of Infinite Branches. That's the name. You want to have her on your team. She has a wealth of experience in global aviation finance. Shelley, looking forward to sharing your specialized industry perspective with our general viewers and listeners. Welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Vince, thank you for including me in this fabulous panel of people who I greatly respect in the industry. And thank you to the viewers, the audience, for participating in this. And if you have any questions for any of us, please reach out. We want to make sure that we're answering your questions and we can point you in the right direction.
And so Shelley will be hosting the rest of the show. No, well said, Shelley. So what you'll hear out of this notable panel of guests is their entrepreneurial spirit. They've all got it. They're all successful with it, which brings me to the aviation CPA firm, Houck Christensen. Did I say that right, Angel?
You sure did.
Okay, great. Houck Christensen is an aviation CPA firm. Angel Houck, who's joining us today, like her partner, is a CPA and aviation tax consultant. That sounds like some really important stuff. If it's about federal and state income tax compliance, you're definitely going to want to consult Angel. Angel, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So having financial brainiacs, I like to call you guys, and then legal scientist is a great way and all, but having that with commercial pilot's license, who spends a lot of time in and around business jets, etc. Now we're kind of in my wheelhouse. Kandi Spangler is sales director for JetAVIVA, and throughout her expansive aviation career has worked on both sides of sales and operations in the industry. And she's an Embry-Riddle grad. Hey, I didn't go there, but it's just, I think it's great. But here's what's really cool about Kandi. Get this. She is an off-road adventure motorcycle instructor when she's not selling airplanes. Kandi, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you very much. I like to have a diverse background.
Yes, apparently so. That's pretty cool, though, that you do that. It sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
It is a ton of fun.
I bet. So we may touch on that. This is supposed to be about aviation careers, but we may just talk about some off-roading for a minute. I think a great way to get into what you all do and to bring to the table is to talk about a few things here. I actually was thinking of terms of talking about how you put together as a team to work together, because it's a team format or a team way of doing things in terms of working with folks. But I was thinking as we were in pre-show, I think one of the things for the purpose of what we're trying to do is really have you guys tell us a little bit about, because here's the thing. You can be a CPA for just about any industry, right? Actually, for any industry. You can be a lawyer for any industry. You can do sales in any industry, et cetera. So for me, and for our viewers, it's like, well, so why aviation? How did that come about? And I think that's something I know our audience will want to hear about. You know, what inspired you to get into aviation? And, you know, I will throw out to whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. I actually got interested in aviation after I became a lawyer. So I was practicing in the law firm I was with when I first got out of law school, and my office window happened to look out at the business airport. I'd watch the planes take off, or the planes land and take off. And finally, I started taking flying lessons, and I loved that. I never finished it because I never flew enough, but I did, when the opportunity arose, I went for it and said, I want to get into aviation law. I had a background doing transactions, and that's very helpful if you want to be an aviation lawyer. So to be a lawyer, you go to undergraduate, law school, and then you can, in aviation, you can either do litigation, there is aviation litigation, or transactions. And I'm on the transaction side. So I help people buy and sell aircraft.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that because there's a lot of opportunities for our audience in terms of what can be done in that area. So how about you, Angel? CPA, and by the way, so Michelle, you did take flying lessons, so I take back beating you guys up a little bit on the flying. And Angel, you're taking flying lessons, and Shelley, you're planning on taking flying lessons. So I take it back a little bit, but that's okay. Kandi and I are still pilots. No. How about you, Angel? Where did aviation come into the picture?
Sure. So I always had an interest in the aviation industry. I didn't really know how or if I would ever work in it. When I started college, like so many of us, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked math, and so I gravitated towards the sciences. I was engineering for a couple of semesters. I thought maybe I'd build airplanes. Then I realized I really didn't like physics, so that wasn't going to work out. But I gravitated towards accounting. And so I went down that path, got my CPA. And my first year, actually, as an intern, we had one of our major clients at our firm. It was a small firm, and they were buying an aircraft. And the partner I worked for at the time came in and said, hey, they're buying an airplane. Can you figure it out? And I was like, yeah, sure. It can't be that hard. And started looking into it. And we spent very, very long time and many, many years from that point, really understanding what's all involved and putting it together, and eventually built a practice, and through my firm worked through that. And then several years ago, my partner and I were both looking to move to the next thing. And so that's when we decided to focus solely on aircraft. And so that's all we do now is day in and day out business aviation, structuring and tax planning and all of that good stuff. And I like to tell people if I could make accounting cool, I think I did. It's a good place to be.
You definitely did when you added aviation into the fray. And it is, aviation is an exciting industry. I don't have to tell any of you that, but yeah, I can imagine what you do now is a lot of fun, even though it's crunching numbers. Physics, huh? That's interesting. No, I give you guys, I like to give you guys a hard time, but I've had guests on that have had some really interesting backgrounds, and yet they're either a pilot or they do something else in aviation, sometimes unrelated with some of their backgrounds. So, but anyhow, that's very cool. Kandi, my pilot friend, tell us about you and flying and how you got into, you've done both operations side and sales. So how did that all happen?
Yeah, it was interesting. I grew up on a farm in eastern Ohio, and when I was 14, 15, trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, which I'm still trying to figure out, it was interesting. There was a German exchange student in our high school that was taking flying lessons who just happened to invite me up for a night flight. And that night flight changed everything. That's when I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. And
do you remember what kind of airplane?
It was a 172 Skyhawk.
There you go.
And,
hey, Angel, that sound familiar?
That is the common training bird. So anyways, this was back in, I think, 1992. And I was just enamored with it. And I thought, I want to become an airline pilot because that's the only thing I knew about. That's the only thing that I had been exposed to. And so I borrowed money from a brother and a sister, and I started taking flying lessons. And I soloed when I was 16.
Wow.
And I decided that this was my career path. And so I decided to apply at one of the country's most expensive but most notable schools, and that was Embry-Riddle. And I got accepted there. I did not get accepted into their flying program. I did not have the grades for it. But that's okay because I was determined to fly for a living. So I went down there into a business program.
Everything happens for a reason.
There is, and it's very interesting. This is something else that I want to note, not to give me a pat on the back, but my folks, my dad was a carpenter. My mom did not work, and I got accepted to Embry-Riddle, which was going to be very expensive, and I was determined to go. So I took out loans. I put myself through that school,
Wow.
and I do not regret that at all. I took a chance on myself, and that's probably, if you're going to take a bet on anything, put money down on yourself. And I don't regret that decision at all. I did have a lot of debt when I left, but my first job out of college, which, the only thing they teach you even today, and I think this is starting to change, is military aviation and airlines.
Exactly.
Business aviation kind of gets lost in the sea of information when it comes to aviation.
Absolutely.
And I was very fortunate that our career services there set up an interview for me with a company called Executive Jet Aviation, which is now today's NetJets. And I accepted the interview not because I was interested, but for interview experience. And
Oh, wow.
that is the job that I took when they flew me up to Columbus, Ohio, and I saw their operations, and I was just so impressed with it. And
what an indoctrination into business aviation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And this was at their old building. This was before they opened up like the state-of-the-art facility. But I was very fortunate to have a sister that was very, very career-minded and a mentor. And I had several offers at the time of graduation.
In aviation or just in general?
In aviation. One was in aviation insurance. One was with Lockheed Martin. But this was the lowest offer, was from Executive Jet Aviation. And my sister said, where do you think you would have the most fun?
There you go.
And it was very wise words, because I went to work at the place that I thought would be more fun. And my career, I couldn't be more thankful for this industry that I'm a part of. And like this group here, this Powerhouse that we're on this call with, like I get to work with amazing people. I am so happy that I found this industry.
No, that's that's awesome. And some of the background you've had is exactly what our audience needs to hear, because we never quite know what the path is going to be. And you're right, coming out of a school like Embry-Riddle or any of the other aviation universities tends to lean towards commercial or airlines. And there's nothing wrong with that for those who are interested in that and really are determined to pursue that. But there's, the whole other part of the industry, business aviation, that includes fractional and includes charter, preaching to the choir here, but for our viewers and that type of thing. So very cool. Now, there's somebody that said that she's flown in helicopters a lot because of dad, and actually is interested in the steerman, which is absolutely cool, because I've had the privilege of flying a lot of different types of aircraft, and the steerman was just, when I finally got to fly one, that was like the cream of the crop to me. And it's low and slow, but it's a biplane, open cockpit, etc. So anyhow, Shelley, tell us about you and aviation and where aviation came into the picture.
Oh, I appreciate this opportunity. I think it highlights the fact that there's always been somebody in our lives who introduced us to aviation in some way, shape, or form, and we caught a bug from it. So my bug began when I was about 6 months old with my dad, who's a Marine colonel retired from active duty. Semper Fi to all the men and women out there who are watching this. And I have tremendous respect for what you do and what your families do each day of the year. So he took me up in the helicopters when I was little. He would always take me into the hangars. And when I was in high school, he'd give me an excuse from class so we could go fly in the simulators together. And Vince, the knobology back in the day when I was in high school in those simulators was a little terrifying. I'm happy to see flat panels today, but I never saw anyone who looked like me, meaning a woman, in the flight deck. And I had a mathematical acumen. My father was a self-made individual. He would take me to see his wealth advisor. He would get upset with me when I didn't ask questions. He encouraged me to go into finance and understand economics. So I was steered away from aviation and into the finance community, but I never lost sight of the fact that aviation was out there. It's a huge industry. There's a lot of public companies out there that are manufacturing aircraft that are making it all work as an industry, a global industry. And as I progressed in my career as a bank examiner for a federal regulating corporation, the FDIC, I went into banking for 2 financial institutions, and I also worked in corporate finance. I built those skills one day at a time, one project at a time, and by being curious. And so I ended up going to an organization where to help them start their, believe it or not, wine and vineyard lending practice. And my former boss came on board to run the aviation finance group. And I would run into him every time I would come into our home office, and I would bug him. I'd sit down and ask him, what are the operating costs for this aircraft? What should I know about this? And he was really intrigued that I had this level of interest. And he said, well, maybe one of these days we can work together. And that happened in a moment of serendipity. He called me up and said, my underwriter has left on vacation to Australia for 3 weeks in the middle of a deal, and I need whatever help you can give me. Well, I was on my way to a vacation as well. And I said, tell me about the client. It so happened that it was a hedge fund client that I was working with in New York who was buying his first aircraft. And I said, I know this client inside and out, but I don't know the collateral. If you teach me about the collateral, I'll work with you. And so one by one, over the course of our partnership together, we granted over $1 billion in commitments starting in 2007. And by the time I left last year, we had no losses and no repossessions. And that's a function of being curious, getting to know your clients, getting to know these amazing people in the industry, such as Michelle, Angel, and Kandi, to be able to ask them questions about situations that there's no way I could know about, but I had to be curious and I had to be respectful of the community that's out there. So what I do today, I work with startup organizations in the aviation space to find them the capital that they need, either from debt or equity. And I also work with clients who are buying aircraft as well. And so I get to bring in these amazing partners to help make the transaction flow effortlessly, at least to the client. We all know what's going on in the background.
Chaos behind the scenes, exactly. Yeah.
So hopefully I explained it. It's a journey. It's not a linear one. And I do want to say too, my dad did teach at Embry-Riddle. So I had all of this connection to the aviation industry growing up. And that's why I'm very specific about saying when I finally learned to fly, that's what I want.
Yeah. You know, I think that's all of you have given a great summary of how you've gotten into aviation. And this is the perfect segue with you, Shelley, about really delving into the business side of it in terms of aircraft acquisition, et cetera, from the sales standpoint of of somebody buying an aircraft, and then what's all involved. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on, because of my experience of having worked for a number of years with NBAA and that type of thing, I know that there is and in my conversations with Michelle, I know that there's a lot involved, a lot more than people would ever think. It's not as simple of a process as most would think to buy an aircraft, because you've got to figure out, if you want a new one or a used one. You got to figure out the emission, and if it's going to be what's going to be the right aircraft for you. And that may start as a charter and then go fractional and then go full ownership or things like that. And all of these different elements of it. And then you've got the financial, and you've got the tax, and you've got the transactional aspects in terms of contracts and pre-buy inspection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just took a little piece from everybody. But let's just talk about how you form a team, which all of you have worked with each other in one form or another, and how that comes about, and what that team does. But let's just talk about the process, if we could. And maybe we can start with you, Kandi, because you're the one that's selling aircraft, buying aircraft, et cetera. So why don't you get started, and then you guys can chime in and talk about this whole process as a team.
So the aircraft buying or selling process, if I were to use an analogy, is more like buying or selling a business, not like buying or selling a house. And I think a lot of people, when they come into this industry, they think that, hey, I'm going to buy an airplane, and they look at it like a house transaction. And I'm like, look, you need a team, especially if you're a first-time buyer and they need to still assemble their team. This is where I start going, okay, I do the airplane piece. That's my specialty. I know the markets, I know what to look for and whatnot. When it comes to tax advice, when it comes to structuring the agreements and making sure, this is really interesting. The IRS and the FAA do not agree on a lot of things.
Oh, no, really?
I know it's shocking, right? And so you need a really good aviation attorney to help you navigate those waters. That is not my area of expertise. I need somebody that knows, if they're going to finance the aircraft, or even if they're not, like making sure that they're setting it up for their specific business. And that way that if they can use those funds elsewhere in their business, and what rates are and stuff like that, I've just encompassed the team that is on this call. Those are not my areas of expertise. I know the questions to ask, and I know the people that I call on, and I go, this is who you need to talk to, XYZ client. And so that's usually my first phone call with a new buyer, is going, okay, we need to get your team together. And that's pretty much everybody on this call. And then we go to work. The reason that I know everybody on this call is because we have to work like a well-oiled machine to make this, as Shelley said, a flawless transaction in the eyes of the client. But it's because we're staying a couple steps ahead of, okay, before you take title, do you have the right entity to take title and whatnot? And that's really where Michelle comes into play. So, and getting the tax structure in place. So that is your team. And that's kind of my, 50,000 foot level, approach to working with new aircraft buyers.
Yeah.
Michelle? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that point is that's one of the first things I tell clients when we talk to them is buying an aircraft is unlike any other asset you're ever going to buy. When you think of accounting and you think of cash flow and business, you say, oh, I'm just going to buy it. I'm going to rent it out to all my companies and I'm going to pay for it however. And it doesn't really work that way, because the FAA has a lot of restrictions of what we can do. And we have to confine our tax planning into that. And so the team idea is exactly what you need, because when you're working through this transaction, I think there's really two sides of the transaction. So what I consider the outside, where Kandi is out there looking for the airplane, and you guys are talking about the airplane, you're negotiating the deal on that side, you've got your legal, you're talking to your finance, you've got that whole piece where you're actually looking for and purchasing the asset. And then on the back end, you have your tax and your legal, which are very interdependent. So I may want to do something, but legal may have to tweak it a little bit, and then I'll tweak that and kind of make the pieces move into where we want them to be. And then that piece also encompasses your internal team, who, your tax preparers, your legal counsel, your estate planning sometimes, anybody who has a say on what your world, what your tax world, what your organization world looks like. Because I may say, yeah, this is what we want to do with the airplane, but it may be completely contradictory to what your estate planning attorney or your general counsel is trying to accomplish. So there are so many people involved in a transaction, in an aircraft transaction, to make it right. And it feels a little painful, and I see people's eyes get really big and they're like, this is too complicated, I don't even want to buy it. But what I tell them is, if you do it right the first time, that's it.
It's an easy process from that point on.
Yeah, and it's plug and play.
A streamlined, I shouldn't say easy, a streamlined process from that point on.
Yeah. So the next one you buy, because you're going to buy another one, the next one you buy will be a lot easier process. So it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose on the first one. But
yeah.
Once we move it all in, there is no cookie cutter answer. Once we move the pieces to where they should be, it's going to make your life so much easier going forward.
Sure. Let me go back to Kandi for a second, because I think one of the major factors you just touched on that's really important is there are first-time buyers and even people that have bought planes before but maybe didn't use all of the resources they needed to do it properly and that type of thing. So they're a little frustrated about their previous purchase or whatever. But I wanted to go back to Kandi because I think, and I know this also from my experience at National Business Aviation Association, NBAA, that advocates for business aviation and private aviation. And that is that it's really important for the client to have a good idea of what they need the plane for. How much they're going to use it, how many passengers will they typically have on it, what distance they're probably going to fly most of the time, which varies with everybody. Some people can have several factories in several states. Some have to go cross country a lot. Some have to go international, et cetera, and so forth. Kandi, can you expand on that a little bit and talk about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I take that piece of my job very seriously. I want to make sure that somebody doesn't have buyer's remorse when they get into an aircraft. So I'm going to take a lot of time on the front side to make sure I understand their mission, what airports they're flying into, how many passengers will be on board, how many bags are they taking, are they using this for business or maybe personal or both. There's a lot of different aspects. I mean, even down to like, will there be a dog on board? Do you want a flat floor aircraft, or do you want something with a dropped aisle? It gets into the weeds, and this is where that expertise and taking a step back, because somebody will come to you and go, hey, I picked up this magazine and I saw this really beautiful airplane and I want that. And I'm gonna say, that's great. We can absolutely get you that. But it really is important to take a step back and understand, A, what is the right airplane for the mission, but B, what are the real costs of that airplane? Because I do not want them to call me in 12 months and go, I had no idea how much this was going to cost me. That is a disservice to our industry. And I will tell you, I have talked more people out of buying an airplane than I've talked them into it, because I want to make sure that they understand the real costs associated with it. Now, I will tell you, once they get into business aviation, it is very unlikely they will ever leave.
Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely.
But,
in terms of costs and things like that, though, there are, and I'm sure you guys are going to talk about that, there are alternatives, such as having your aircraft managed, allowing others to use it, and therefore, being able to save and things of that nature. But your point is well taken. If somebody may want a galley, or somebody may typically want a corporate flight attendant, and things like that, those add to the cost, sometimes exponentially, depending on what they want. So so that also, and I don't want to, you know, interfere with everything what everybody wants to say, but I think I consider aviation a relationship business, particularly business aviation. You know, it's all about relationships, and we've all been to the conventions and the various shows and things like that. And you know, when we were down for a couple of years because of COVID and that type of thing, one of the biggest challenges was still maintaining those relationships that we've had and that we want to continue to have, and or new relationships we want to build. So I'll open it back up to you guys.
And I'd like to build on something that Angel said about kind of, you've got people with various expertise in various aspects of aviation, legal, tax, Kandi as a broker, Shelley with finance, but you've also got, in order to do our jobs, we need a lot of information about our client. You know, what is there, as Kandi was saying, how are they going to use it? Business use, personal use, who's going to be on it? How many people are going to be on it? And sometimes that is a lot of questions for one person to answer. So there may be an even larger team that consists of internal people at the business, the regular tax advisor who does the returns. Maybe they've got an in-house counsel or a regular corporate counsel who knows a lot about their entities. That's important from both a legal perspective and from that tax structuring perspective. And then who knows, you know, how they're going to use it, and possibly about their other financing, because you might need to know that in case there's any cross defaults or something in a loan document.
As Shelley shakes her head in agreement. Yeah. Shelley?
Yes. And I'd like to build upon two things that were previously said. Number one, you have to communicate amongst the deal team. And I can give you a real world example from earlier this year. I was brought in to make life very easy for an ultra high net worth client who had very limited time. And the aircraft management company wanted to hangar the aircraft at one location. And I reached out to our fabulous tax advisor, Angel, and said, does this make sense? And she said, no, it does not. And it would have cost the client a significant amount of money had we gone with what the aircraft management company had suggested. So we got together on a call and laid out a plan for the client to have an optimal return on owning the aircraft and hangaring it in a location that made sense. You know, there's definitely some costs related to keeping it further away from where he wanted it to be, but in the end, what we decided to do made sense. What I'll also say too is that you, especially with the finance community, everyone says, oh, it takes so much time, and they stop right there. And some people say, oh, this is too much to do. You're asking for too much information. The reality is, I don't think anyone has ever seen it where chartering an aircraft in some way, shape, or form makes money for you. So in the sense of buying a business, you cannot think of your asset that you're buying for millions of dollars as going to be an income, a gross income or net income generator. You have to think of it truly as an investment in your brand. In order to get financing, you need to communicate with all parties on this team to understand the structure. And that's the key to it. How does this aircraft ownership fit within the client's organizational structure, so to speak? Banks are incredibly regulated. We have to abide by something called know your customer due diligence, which means you need to know who owns it and who's benefiting from it. And you have to start there. If you do not know that, then you cannot underwrite to the transaction. And banks don't want to own an aircraft at the end of the day. They want to build a relationship, a long-term relationship with you as the owner and with your team. So getting on board with your financial community early on, as soon as possible, is really important because they have a lot of questions that they have to ask you, and they have to work together to ensure that the timing and the cadence meets everybody's needs.
I'm going to take it. Go ahead.
Oh, so I think the takeaway here is we're going to ask you a lot of questions, and we want to know a lot of things. For tax purposes, we're going to dive very, very deep, because all of these tiny, tiny details can make a huge difference. It can make a difference of whether you get 100% deduction or 0 deductions, just based on things that don't seem like major questions. I ask people all the time, I'm like, what type of entity is this? And they say it's an LLC. I'm like, well, that's great. But for tax purposes, what type of return does it file? Is it an S corp, a C corp, a partnership, a disregarded entity? And a lot of times they don't know. And so that's why we want to have those people who do know, because that makes all the difference. And when we're talking about deductibility, Kandi's talking about wanting to know, what are you going to use it for? Your dog's going to be on board. How are you going to use it? And then on my end, I want to know, how are your businesses structured? What are you flying for business? Who are you seeing? Are you bringing spouses? Are you bringing friends? Are you bringing girlfriends? What are you doing on this airplane? Because all of those things are also going to impact your deductibility. Who's paying for it? Do you want your business to pay? Do you want other people to pay? How are you going to cash flow this? And all of these things, we have to know them to be able to give the right advice. And so it's going to feel like a deep dive into your life, but these things are very, very important to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Because to Shelley's point, it's a very expensive asset. And for a lot of people, it is the most expensive asset that they have. And it is very expensive to maintain. So if you do it incorrectly, it can cost you so much. Shelley's example, we had planned on it being in one state, and all of a sudden we're moving it to another state. You're talking about 9.75% sales tax on a $20-30 million airplane. That's a big check to get surprised with. So, making sure that you have these things done up front. And I like to tell people, when you're looking at the transaction, you've got all these teams, and on that back of the house team, the tax should be kind of your first and your last, right? So up front, I like to have a very first call. As soon as you start talking to Kandi, as soon as you start looking and deciding that you're moving in that direction for an airplane, let's talk. Let's figure out where we want it to be. Let's get that LLC set up. Let's get everything in place. Talk about, do we need state registrations? Because some states are very, very slow, and we need 12 or 15 weeks to get things in line. Sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a minute, who knows? But we have a plan. Then Michelle and the legal team has everything they need. So when you find that aircraft, you're ready to jump on it. You can get all your documentation, you can get it put together. And then when you finally close on it, come back to me, and I'll help make sure that you've got your documentation and everything that you need going forward.
Yeah. Angel, you just touched on something too that I'm glad you brought it up. And I just want to say something briefly about it. And that's discretion. That's extremely important. That's why we call it private aviation. But in business aviation, it stands out even more. Somebody that's either wealthy or that's works for a corporation, owns the corporation, et cetera, so forth. Discretion is number one, for just about anything. That's why we have things like blocked aircraft tail numbers and things of that nature. It's just really, really important. So I thought it was, you kind of touched on it, and I was like, yeah, let me place some emphasis on that, because that probably makes a big difference in terms of maintaining your current client base and continuing to have the reputation to get new clients. Would everybody agree with that?
Absolutely. And that's very big in this industry, because people who are buying airplanes generally are notable or public people, and they already have a lot of their life out there. They don't necessarily want the rest of it. And I think that kind of comes back to your planning as well, especially for Michelle and I on our side of how are we going to own it? Because there are ways to kind of bring in that anonymity with, LLCs and trusts and things like that. So that's another piece of our puzzle. Some people are like, no, I'm actually going to name the airplane my company name. I want everybody to know. And other people want as much privacy as possible. So that's on our end to understand what our clients' goals are, because it's different for everyone, and somehow work that into our overall plan.
Thus, corporations that have these hangars with their aircraft totally unmarked. The aircraft is unmarked, the hangar is unmarked, et cetera, and so forth. Hey, I want to take advantage of something with having an all-female panel today. I can't overlook the fact that it was kind of interesting because when Michelle and I were putting this together, I just talked to her about transactional, purchasing or selling an aircraft and who's involved with it. And she said, a CPA, et cetera, et cetera. But it ended up being an all-female panel. So I thought, oh, that's cool. But at the same time, especially even talking with you guys in pre-show, I just like to touch on maybe some of the challenges that you have faced being a female in a predominantly, because it's still a predominantly male industry, aviation, aerospace, aviation, business aviation, commercial aviation, still kind of run by guys. I hate to admit it, but it's true. But I think it's important for our viewers to understand or get a sense of or an idea about what that all means in terms of your growth, because all of you are excelling and doing very well in the industry. But I would imagine you've had your challenges too.
Vince, I'm going to hop in here. So one of the biggest advantages of being a woman in this industry is there is no line to the bathroom at NBAA for the women's restroom.
So true, Kandi. Any conference outside of Iowa.
A big deal.
Priceless.
And it happens nowhere else but this industry.
That's too funny.
I absolutely love it when I see this giant line to the men's room and I can stroll right into the women's room. That being said, we are starting to see the line form. And I'm really happy to see we are attracting more and more females, very, very smart, high level performing females, because we are in a male dominated industry. And I like that mix. I really enjoy that. But we are finally starting to see that line grow. And I love seeing all the women that are joining the different ranks, like even aircraft maintenance, technical jobs, and we're seeing it across the board. We definitely need more of that. And I think it comes back to Shelley's point where we need to show young people that just because they don't see somebody that looks like them in that industry, they should still explore it, because I think there's a ton of opportunity. And this is a relationship industry, and it's one of the reasons that I love business aviation so much is the people that have been attracted to this industry seem to be really high level, like problem solvers. And that's all we are. We are problem solvers. And we work so well together. And I can't imagine working for any other industry, but I know that that's kind of a segue off your female comment. I'll let somebody else answer.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah. Well, I think the FAA has done a very good job through 2 different task forces of highlighting that women, the number of women as a percent of the industry has not changed in 50 years. There's good news that more women are joining, but the percentage isn't changing. And so what all of us do to attract and retain talent to the industry, not just attract, but make sure we retain it, is really important. And that's one of the things that we do through the International Aviation Women's Association, of which I serve on the board, in which many of you are members. Vince, I'll plug this in too. For men who are interested, men can join Iowa, and 100% of their dues go straight to our scholarship programs.
Nice.
So when you have this environment where we have a great mentoring program, in our beta testing, 3 of our apprentice members received promotions, and that's a function of women who have drive, supporting others. And I think what I've seen in this industry, more so than any other industry I've been a part of, the women in the industry want to support other women. And I use the term support rather than help. Help comes from a position of power. Support is about the development of a long-term partnership where you pool your resources and you build a foundation where you keep growing together. And that is what this is about. I am here. I've stayed in this industry because of Michelle Wade. What she does is fantastic. It is the platinum standard for how all of us should build our careers in aviation. So, and along the way, I've seen what Angel is doing. what Kandi is doing, and so many other women who are out there. And if you can see it, you can definitely be it. And so for all the young women who are out there who are interested in joining the aviation industry, there's a community that wants you.
So I have a platinum friend, Michelle. How about you, Michelle? You want to chime in on that?
Oh, yes. I second what they have, what Kandi and Shelley said. There are advantages to being a woman in this industry in that, people remember you, stand out, short line to the bathroom. And also what Shelley said, we all work to support others in the industry and work together. It's important to work together as a team and support each other.
Angel?
Yeah, I mean, every event I go to, there's more and more women at them. And especially, I think, when we go and I'm involved in some business aviation events or career events and bringing in new people. We just did one a few months ago at Embry-Riddle, trying to bring people into the business aviation industry. And you're seeing more and more women coming out of the schools and moving into it. Being a woman in the industry, I haven't ever seen it as a hindrance, and I haven't ever felt that there was any downside or hindrance to it. I think just like any industry, you do what you do it right, you give it 100%, and your work is going to show, and, the cream rises to the top and all of that good stuff. But, it's more and more coming to the industry on a regular basis. And the great thing about the aviation industry, and you can see it right here in this panel, is most of the people who are in it because of some sort of passion or something that drew them there. Very few people go into school and say, I'm going to be an aviation attorney. They, are drawn to it in some way. So when you go to these events and when you work with other people, when you're on these teams, most of the time, people are just happy that they get to make a living talking about airplanes. And so they're very welcoming, and it's a really great group and great industry to work in just overall.
I think that's a perfect segue for the last portion of what I'd like to accomplish with this show for our audience. And that is talking about and getting advice from you guys. To somebody in high school, to somebody in college, to a postgraduate who's graduated maybe with a degree in aviation or maybe with a degree in accounting or something else, in business, in law, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do next. And either in the back of their mind or through some kind of influence, they've always had an interest in aviation. What kind of advice would you guys give with all of your experiences to them about that?
I would say attend an aviation event and meet people. If you attend an event and meet people in the industry, you're going to learn a lot about it and probably fall in love with it. And sorry, Shelley.
No, Michelle, I think that's great. It segues into what I was going to say. And I always tell people ABC, always be curious. Keep that curiosity going. If you're interested, the internet has made finding out about different companies, different opportunities very easy. So tap into that curiosity, make a connection through LinkedIn, through somebody professional, and ask them really good questions about how they got into the industry and what's keeping them there and how to become involved. One of the things I definitely tell people when you go to these events, try and have in your mind, how do you want to connect with people? Who do you want to connect with? And how can you build a relationship together? So I'll step off my soapbox but just
no,
remember,
that's
ABC,
absolutely right on point.
ABC, always be curious.
So I think going to the events is a great idea, especially if you attend like NBAA in October, because it's not just legal and accounting and finance. There are so many careers in aviation that you don't even know are aviation. I mean, there are people who make just custom fabrics for your airplane. There are people who make custom decals. There are artists. There are all these different industries that only work on airplanes. And it's amazing how people have drawn into that. And so opening your eyes to see even what's out there. cleaning services that only work on airplanes. You know, pretty much anything you have a passion for, you can probably direct it into an airplane in some way, shape, or form. You know, and always be curious, you know, look and see what's out there. We have members of our team, when we interviewed them, you know, CPAs, just looking for general CPAs, we asked them why they were looking to change jobs. And they're like, we weren't, but I love aviation. I'm a pilot. I would love to like blend the two. So you never know when an opportunity is going to come up to blend your passion and aviation and kind of bring that all in together. So I think always keep your eyes open for opportunities and always prepare. One of my favorite quotes is, luck is the intersection of opportunity and preparation, right? So you prepare, you're always building, you're always putting together the next.
Write that down.
The industry. You're learning the industry. And so when that opportunity arises, it's there and you're ready to jump on it. You're ready to take it.
Kandi?
Yeah, I think my kind of closing piece of advice would be there's a big difference between a job and a career. For me, I am very fortunate that I have found a career that I look forward to showing up every day. I do not dread getting out of bed. I don't, you know, think about like, oh, I got to go to the desk again. No 2 days, no 2 deals are ever the same. And again, because of the people that are in this industry, just makes this job so much more enjoyable. That is not to say that I don't have challenging days. We have challenging clients, we have great clients, we have, you know, everything in between, but that's what makes it so rewarding. Again, from the problem solving standpoint. And if I can't solve the problem, I know who to pick up the phone and call. The other piece of advice that I would part with is, you know, we love talking about our industry because we're so passionate about it.
You're telling me?
Yeah, I know. So if you know somebody or connect with somebody that's in the business aviation community or, you know, any part of the aerospace industry that you're interested in, ask them if you can shadow them for a day.
Good advice.
I think more people would do that if they were asked. The thing is we don't know to like, you know, advertise it. Hey, do you want to shadow me? I'm not going to put that out there. But if somebody were to come to me, and incidentally, so I live in Denver, Colorado, and one of my childhood friends that moved out here from Ohio had a son who was interested in aviation. She called me up and she said, hey, you know, we live in Denver too. My son's interested in aviation. Can he shadow you for a day? And I was like, absolutely. Well, it turns out he did not become an aircraft broker. He became an aircraft mechanic. He went and got his A&P certificate, and he's now working in our industry. And I like to think it's partly because he shadowed me for a day. I let him listen to my phone calls. I took him out to look at one of the business jets, one of my clients' business jets, and just showed him around. So for those of you listening that are looking at a career, you know, if you know somebody in this industry, ask them to shadow for a day. I bet they'll do it. And
they won't bite.
They won't. We're very proud of our industry, and we love to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful point that you just brought up, because there are so many people that are interested, particularly young people, and they don't really know where to start, but they also are afraid to reach out. I was at Oshkosh last year, getting ready to go again next week. Had a couple of young people that were with me as part of the trip out there. And, you know, one of them I had to actually say, hey, listen, you got to be a little bit more, I don't want to use the term aggressive, but, you just have to step out there,
ask some
questions, say hello. And I said, you'll be surprised. Not only will they answer your question, they're probably going to give you a whole lot more than you originally asked for.
That is absolutely true. Yeah.
So, and he started doing that, and he goes, oh God, you're right. You know, I said, yeah, everybody in the industry, no matter what level or what they do, are very proud of it. We're a community, aviation is. And so, yeah, we take pride in it. We're very passionate about it, as you guys all are, et cetera. So I think that's a great point. And I think all of your input today and sharing what you guys know has been really, really great. I I've actually even learned a few things. So
I could say one last thing for
sure,
viewers
Shelley.
there. A while back, I was connecting with the NBAA, and they estimate that there's 1.2 million people working in business aviation in the United States. And they couldn't tell me exactly how many were responsible for flying or working on the aircraft. But what was said is that business aviation is filled with small businesses supporting small and medium communities. And there is so much great work that is being done in the communities throughout this country that are being done through the hands of people who are working in all aspects that Angel pointed out, and Kandi and Michelle, that go above and beyond what we do. So there's opportunities for so many people with different backgrounds and different life experiences to become involved. It's not just about the youth, it's about people finding a way into the industry. And please consider this for your career.
Well said. Well, listen, we're running out of time, but I want to thank all of you, Michelle, Shelley, Angel, Kandi, for your input and for taking the time to be on All Things Aviation and Aerospace. And I also just wanted to say that I think something you brought up at the beginning of the show, Kelly, and that is all of you are available. Did I just call you Kelly? Shelley. All of you are available for me not to talk. All of you are available to, if anybody has any questions about what you guys individually do, et cetera, and about the industry, that they can reach out to you. They know how, they have my information, the viewers do, and everything. So I will pass that along as it comes up, and it usually does. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for being a part of this.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thanks.
for including me.
Absolutely.
All these amazing people. Thank you.
Sure. So you've been watching All Things Aviation and Aerospace, and you can pick it up on as a webcast or a podcast. So if any of you who are thinking about pursuing a career in aviation or aerospace or any aspect of it, we have shows that are archived on every aspect of the industry and that type of thing, and it's all available on my Private Air Media Group YouTube channel and Facebook page, which we've been live on today, as well as whatever podcast listening platform that you listen to your podcast on. As I mentioned earlier, next week is the EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association's Air Venture at Whitman Regional Airport in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Oshkosh Bagosh, we like to say. It's pretty exciting. They have over 500,000 people attend in a week, but it's all outdoors. So it's like going to an aviation festival. You will see everything from a kite to practically a supersonic transport and everything in between. And they have rides and all that kind of stuff. But it's really an aviation gathering unlike any other that I've ever experienced. And I think if you don't go next week, if you have an opportunity to go next year or down the line, and you're really interested in kind of getting a fire hose of aviation information and involvement, then EAA Air Venture is the place to go to. So, but thanks everybody for watching and listening. And until next time, everybody take care and stay safe. See you guys.
Thanks. Bye.